everyone. As Ian says, I'm the chair of GCVS, so I just wanted to say thanks to Lynn and Ian for organising today another kind of successful session, bringing people together across the sector. And I'm chair of, Chief Executive of Queen's Cross Housing Association, but I also sit as a commissioner on the Poverty and Inequality Commission, and it's partly in that role that I'm here today. One, just to give a bit of a brief background to who the Commission are and what they do, and around how we're looking at COVID-19, how we want to take that forward. But really the main part of the role is actually being here and listening to what everyone has to say and taking that back to the Commission. Now, can I move that myself?
No, I'll need to do it, Shona, sorry.
Right, that's okay. I'll just put my hand up when I want you to move it then. Okay. Okay, so I've got a couple of slides now. This is definitely telling people things they know, but it's more by way of a backdrop or a context to the establishment of the Poverty and Inequality Commission, and it's to reinforce, I suppose, that what we know before the COVID crisis was that we had around 20% of people in Scotland living in relative poverty, and 1 in 4 of them were children. And that was mostly children living in working households. And the other, I think, key figure around that was that we'd started to see a rise in pensioner poverty again, despite that been falling for a number of years. So it also showed us that, sorry, can I get the next slide in? That within those groups that were hit the hardest, again, were people who had someone with a disability in the family, lone parents, and within that, disabled lone parents losing most, people from Black and minority ethnic communities, and as a result of the sort of welfare and tax reforms, women significantly losing out, probably at a rate of double the loss for men. So we were already seeing before COVID hit the poverty target in particular groups, and many of those particular groups are the ones who are being hit once again even harder by COVID. So that statement, that terminology that was being used recently about supercharging inequalities, I think is really evident when you look at who was being hit the hardest before the crisis, and then who the crisis has hit hardest again. So it was in the backdrop to those original kind of figures that the Poverty and Inequality Commission was set up. It was set up in statute using the Child Poverty Act in 2017, and it's got 3 broad parts to the remit. One is monitoring and scrutinising progress against the very challenging targets on reducing child poverty that the Scottish Government set itself. And obviously those challenging targets are going to be even more so as a result of the impact of COVID. We're also available to provide advice across Scottish Government, and crucially also about promoting the reduction of poverty and inequality in Scotland. So being a voice, not stepping on the toes of other organisations who clearly have that remit, but where we can, using the leverage we've got to amplify that voice, and particularly the voice around lived experience. There's 8 of us on the Commission, plus the chair, and a whole range of experience across the piece. Now, I think there's a couple of things that are important, and one of the key things is that because the Commission was established in statute, it gives it a real independence. And I think one of the things all the commissioners are aware of is that the role of the Commission is essentially to do that speaking truth to power. So there is a role in the Commission being able to say sometimes the uncomfortable things that need to be said, and that can be again a role which other people might feel more challenging. But because it's been established in statute, a minister who doesn't particularly like what the Commission's saying can't just get rid of it. And I think that's really, really important, that decision was made to establish this independent body to look at progress and to say whether that's being made or not, and to offer advice and to promote the reduction and prevention of poverty in Scotland. And also we have to publish anything that we say to Scottish ministers. So again, I've pretty much covered this, but the key things are the independence, the ability to say what needs to be said. But the key things that the Commission determined about the way it would operate was working with other organisations, using evidence, but very much about amplifying and providing a platform for those whose voices are not often heard. So we're not a campaigning organisation. There are clear campaigning organisations who do that absolutely brilliantly. We'll work with them and we'll work with anyone that's out there, and we'll listen to what people have to say. We're not about, you know, as I say, doing anything, duplicating anything. We're looking to add value and to take what's important and to present that to government. So our priorities looking forward then, obviously we've been looking at a number of issues. We were only established last year, so we're still relatively new. And we've been looking at a range of issues that we wanted to address. Then, of course, as the same with everyone, the COVID-19 impact has become really, you know, top and central in terms of what we're doing, and really, particularly, obviously, the implications for those experiencing poverty and the impact that has on increasing inequality. And particularly in the longer term for the Commission as a whole, we're looking at what are those impacts in relation to child poverty, because that's absolutely central to the work we're doing, to the wider poverty and inequality agenda, to existing policies. But I think most importantly, and this ties in with what Councillor Bell and Ian were saying at the beginning, is how do we ensure that the approaches to the economy and poverty in the future are transformed by this experience. It can't be back to business as usual. It can't be. And I think one of the key concerns that people have is looking at some of the groupings that have been created to address future economic impact and change are not necessarily filled with people whose natural instinct is to be transformative. I think there's a bit of a concern that the people around some of those tables are very much are keen to get back to business as usual. That's what they know and it's what suits them. We need to grab this opportunity to be saying this has to be different. There's talk and discussion for a long time around the wellbeing economy, about looking at doing things differently, about putting people front and centre in terms of economic change. And this gives us that opportunity. The idea of having a social change and an economic change group is good, but it's actually where they overlap. It's that Venn diagram where they intersect. It's absolutely fundamental to this. So one of the things that we did was set up a specific working group to look at the immediate crisis. So while the Commission's looking at the longer term impacts of some of these things and how you respond to that in terms of a newly shaped economy and all of those things, the working group was looking at what's happening now on the ground, what are the immediate things that need to be done to respond to people in poverty. And one of the things that was coming through very strongly was around food insecurity. A whole lot of work going on the ground, particularly through the third sector, but a sense in which maybe the coordination of that, the strategic backing to that wasn't as good as it could have been. So we produced a briefing paper to Scottish Government and offered our support on that. And there was a key request within that for some more visible leadership in terms of coordinating and voicing what the issues were around that food insecurity. And to inform a second briefing paper on that, we're about to issue a survey. So all of the people here should be receiving that. We'll be sending that out through membership bodies like GCVS, but also directly to organisations that will be promoted in social media. So really it would be good to have as many organisations as possible complete that. And that's really to tell us, you know, what were the challenges that you were facing? Have they improved or not? And what are the future challenges in the next few months, so that we can get that looked at really quickly and start to see if the responses that are in place are the right ones, or if there's a need for anything else. And the future areas of work that the working group are going to be looking at are around the Scottish Welfare Fund. Again, is that being accessed? Is it accessible? Has there been changes in who's accessing that? Is it easy enough to access? Is it consistent across the country? Because I think already we're aware that there's very different experiences for different people in different parts of the country. Looking at Carers Alliance and carers, again, absolutely fundamental group who really impacted by this, but perhaps not being heard as much as we think they should be. And also looking at the free school meals data collection. We're very interested in how the food fund is operating, how again the consistency and the differentials around how that's been distributed across the country, whether that's getting to parents, is it getting to parents in the right way, and is what's happening actually working. And then the future longer term plans for the Commission, rather than the immediate working group, are around kind of 4 themes, probably reasonably predictable, but looking at working earnings, social security, housing costs and cost of living, and again exploring them by working with others and focusing on what that means around changes to policy and practice, the ability to deliver these targets about reducing child poverty, but absolutely making sure that people with experience are heard. And I think, to finish, I think the most important thing is always about changing not just the attitudes of decision makers or influencers, but the public, because you know, there's a sense in what drives what, and for a long time we know there's been a hugely negative narrative around poverty, about the responsibility for poverty being firmly placed on those in poverty, and many more of the sort of systemic reasons around that being ignored to some extent. And I think that unfortunately, because of the nature of this crisis and the demographic shift of those affected by it, we're seeing far more people coming into potentially poverty, certainly more people having to access help and assistance in a way that they probably thought they might not have to. So there is a real opportunity there, I think, to have conversations with people about what poverty is and how that can be prevented in a way that possibly might not have been possible within the last decade or so. And that, I think, is the real opportunity to start looking at transformative changes to the economy, by having, I think, people willing to start to shift their mindset about what a future might look like, and not necessarily being wedded to what the world was before this crisis happened. So a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but really, as I say, I'm here to listen to what you have to say, because I think that's important to inform the work of the Commission. We can do things, but it has to be about what's important and what's right from the people who are on the ground and telling us. So thank you very much.